Hello to all of you and welcome to this second masterclass here at the Millenium Film Festival. My name is Livia Tinka, I'm a programmer at the festival and I have the pleasure of welcoming today here with me the director of the film A Man and a Camera, Guido Hendrikx. Hello Guido.
Hi.
We're going to talk together today about several topics that his film talks about. First, I would like to talk about documentary as power relations. What is the documentary encounter? What is the relationship between the director, his camera, and his subjects? But before we get into the heavy stuff, let's say, I'm just gonna give you some practical information. You can see Guido's film on our online platform, sooner.be. The film is still available until the 30th of May, so you still have time to see it. The film is presented here at the festival in our Living Together section. Before we get into the topic, I will also do a small presentation of Guido's previous work and Guido's background. So he came to filmmaking and screenwriting from the liberal arts and science. He directed several short documentaries, very successful. I'm citing only two, Escort in 2013 and Among Us in 2014. They caused quite an uproar at the festivals, and I'm sure if we have the time we'll get into that, because his films challenge both the public and the festival programmers, so it's very interesting to see how he manages to do that. His film Stranger in Paradise, directed in 2016, has opened IDFA. Also, it won a special jury award at IDFA, and it was nominated to European Documentary Film Awards. So, an important background. Guido, I will start with the first question. Can you do a short presentation of what your film is about?
A Man and a Camera.
Yes.
Yeah, it's very simple. The concept is just I ring a doorbell and I just wait at the doorstep, and that's that's it. And I never talk. There are some strict set of rules that I bound myself to. But then. Yeah, I think where it's about there are different themes probably that are being addressed in this film, like what you mentioned before, the power relation between the one behind and the front of the lens, but also maybe like in general, how do we relate to a video camera these days? How do we relate to the unknown? So when like a stranger, like something is in front of your door you've never seen before. I think that are like the main topics.
How did you have the idea to do this film? How did it all happen?
Yeah, it was actually you can call it a coincidence, because I was I think nearly a decade ago. Actually it was in Belgium. Not in Brussels, but I was in Spa for a week with fellow students. I was still studying at film school back then in Amsterdam. And there I got this little assignment to, I don't exactly remember what the assignment was, but I had to with like a restricted way of telling a certain emotion. I think that was the assignment. And then one way or the other, I just started to randomly film people on the street in perpetual silence. So this was the first encounter with this kind of concept. So I just roamed the streets of Spa and I just filmed people literally in their face, you could say, and they reacted all very differently. And I put this material aside for several years, and when I revisited it, there were a few things that really drew my attention. So I got the chance to look at the material with different eyes years later, and then I decided to make it into a film and to conceptualize the different rules where I just talked about, like how and I changed, like somehow I changed the arena as well. So this is a little bit how it started.
I imagine that filming people in the street was a bit more confrontational.
It was, yeah. I felt a little bit like a stalker, so very obtrusive. Of course, I think when you will see the film, you will still have this uncomfortable feelings maybe as a viewer, I think, as an audience. But yeah, you're right. Like the thing was that I didn't give the people a quick possibility to escape. Since I was following them just on the street, that could go on for hours, and then they didn't know where to go, and some like hid in their car, and the other one, you know, they tried to go inside their house and quickly close the door, but you know, that walk to their house could take maybe 5 or 10 minutes. At the same time, people, of course, became also very angry, and I was the one who had to run in that sense. So it went both ways, but no, it was that was the reason that I decided to move my my arena, or my place of handling, you could say, to the front doors, to people's doorstep, because then they could just easily shut the door, and that was like a very easy and clear sign that they were not interested.
Before I get to the more deep questions, why the title of the film? Because obviously it's this game with Dziga Vertov's film Men with the Movie Camera. I've seen this reference several times when people talk about your film. Did you have this in mind when you chose this title?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's hard not to have this film in mind, I think, if you're into documentary filmmaking. But well, like I said before, there were when I started to when I began to conceptualize this film, this project, I started to develop these kind of rules, and like the obvious one are, of course, never speak, also including non-verbal communication. Also, once the door was opened, I was very strict that the person I was filming had to direct the encounter, so they were in charge. They decided what to do and when to stop. I really tried to give away the control as a director. And the third one, I think that one relates maybe a little bit to Vertov, was that I really had to confine myself to ordinary people, ordinary environments. And I think that's, I can say, in that case, Vertov inspired me because of, yeah, the ordinary kind of, you know, I always say, or not always, but when I was working on this film, I thought maybe there are generally three kinds of documentaries, and I think the vast majority today are the documentaries that are exploring extraordinary subjects. So let them be famous singers or poets, or maybe suppressed people, or you know, like the people who are like the non-ordinary people, and most of the time they are cultivated in a very ordinary way, so that it's easy for the viewer to watch and to process. And then there's a second one, and I think the second type is, I think some of my previous films, like Strange in Paradise, maybe belongs to that category, like extraordinary subjects or topics, but also in kind of experimental or extraordinary forms. But I think the one category that gets less and less present these days, and for me it's like maybe the most difficult one, and I think also Vertov is in this category, are the films about ordinary people, but being presented in extraordinary ways, or extraordinary ways of storytelling and forms, because they are like, to a certain extent, they always try to invent film language, and I think that's like maybe the highest thing you can achieve when you make a film, especially a documentary.
It's very interesting what you say, because indeed your film is challenging not only the form but also the subject, as in a way the topic of the film is the film relation in itself between a director and his character. And what intrigued me at first was that I had the impression you were reversing the roles. You've already touched a bit on this earlier, and you were reversing the roles and the balance of power, because your characters were supposed to direct the encounter. Was this something fundamental for you in this film that you were trying to explore?
Yeah, this was fundamental. Yeah, this was. I mean, of course, it also developed from the rule that I wasn't allowed to speak. Also, like in a non-verbal way, I could smile, of course, a little bit, but I could never, like, if they would ask a question, I couldn't nod yes or no, these kind of things. But yeah, that was for me. It was interesting to explore. Like, of course, like I was still in power in the end in the editing room. Like as a filmmaker, you have a lot of power and you can manipulate anything that's on your screen in multiple ways. We all know. So yeah, I was curious what would happen. You know, if I would let them direct the encounter, would that give, like, maybe, I don't know, maybe to a certain extent, a sincere portrait of everyday life, ordinary life. That was something I would like to explore. Yeah.
I was very intrigued also because I don't know if you know about the Marina Abramovic experiment in the museum, where it was an installation tens of years ago. She had on a table several objects, and the public could work on her body in different ways.
Yeah, with the objects. Yeah, I think
And I was surprised that in your film, in the end, the reactions we see are very respectful. And I was wondering whether the presence of the camera gave you this sort of immunity. What do you think about this? Because in Marina Abramovic's case, it turns violent pretty quickly.
Yeah, maybe it's also. I think the objects on the table are quite, you know, they
inviting, definitely.
Violent, right? Inviting in that sense. I think in my case, you know, that's, of course, you know, when I think I worked on this project quite a long time, and I think I rang more than 400 doorbells. I was at 400 doors, and of course, after a certain period of time, it's inevitable that you are developing also certain expectations. You know, because most of the people would close the door, and I was invited like maybe 7 or 8 times, which is to me quite inside. So it's quite a high, like, percentage in my view. So that was a big surprise that people had this amount of trust. But yeah, I mean, of course, you know, like, there are the obvious reasons like vanity, or maybe you know, why do people do this? You know, why do they invite me in their home, and why are they so welcoming? You know, do they want to give a good image of themselves to the rest of the world? Or, you know, I had a little bit this skeptical, more cynical ideas when I was starting, but I think when I was editing the film, and now since it's finished, I think the interesting thing is that the people that invite me in the last part of the film, I think they don't particularly have these reasons I just mentioned. They just let the camera be. They just accept it, that the camera is there, and they don't necessarily have a hidden agenda behind it. That's what I figure now. But I don't know how you feel about it. Maybe.
I would propose to watch a video, because you're actually introducing one of the themes I would like to discuss with you afterwards.
All right.
Nou, dat weer, denk ik.
Misschien wil je zelf wat vertellen aan de winkel.
Ja, vertel er eens even wat. Hey.
Van wat?
Nou, dat weet ik niet. Vrees wat die man jij erop.
Hij gaat filmen.
Oh ja, dat weet ik. Dan maar net erheen praten, hè?
Maar...
Misschien wil je wat op de koekje van die.
Wat soort voor vrees je kennen heeft.
Maar, wat vindt hij daar goed?
Dat is een video. Camera. Ik denk dat we in de klepel komen. Goed, hè? En dan laten we jou die man eens even een koekje. Hey. Bloot is rauw, hè?
Ja, ik moet nou weg naar mijn pedicure. We hebben het druk vandaag. een vroege afspraak om 10:30. Dus ik ga mijn elektrische fiets pakken. Je wacht net zo lang tot het verlegen wordt.
Ik snap niet dat hij het zo lang volhoudt. Zonder iets te zeggen.
Nou, dan kom je maar zeg ik zo.
Zo. Zeg het maar. Ah. Serieus. Pak.
So we're back from this short scene. I'm rebouncing with the question. So, as I was already mentioning during the video, what touched me in this scenes is the diversity of their reactions. So some are embarrassed by the camera and they do a little play out in front of it. Some completely block it out, like the monk does it. But we have this Turkish family where they believe that you cannot speak, and there's this moment where the lady comes and shows you her child, and for me it was very touching because her reaction surprised me and it was very authentic. And several times during the film I was thinking that their reactions were conditioned by their let's say media literacy. How do you think? What do you think about all this?
Yeah, I think it is the case. I mean, on many occasions, also what I heard back plenty of times that people were thinking that I was from the lottery, you know, so that they actually won a prize. And then in the beginning, I have many scenes and a lot of material that people are like, wow, okay. You know, where's the car with when will it happen, you know, when will this car reveal itself? And then, oh, actually he isn't going to reveal himself. And then he also were quite disappointed that it was just this ordinary documentary filmmaker, like standing at the door with nothing to give in that sense. No, so yeah, it's true. Like, of course, we're used to all these kind of programs, like, you know, camera at the door, but also what you said, like from your own background, you know, how do you relate to a camera? What are your experiences? And I think the Turkish lady was just, it was. I also find it very touching. At that moment, actually, I felt a bit ashamed because, of course, I know I am not deaf in that sense. It was also a role I played, so I just. And they, you know, that's what I figured also, like, although I tried to give away control, it was always the vulnerability was always on the other side, you know. I wasn't like, my vulnerability was just the only thing was that they sometimes could hit me with anything, but like emotionally I could like video camera is also a machine in that sense, or a mechanism you can hide behind, I always say, and I think this film particularly also shows that this vulnerability is beautiful, and but for me also at that point uncomfortable.
I want to react at several levels because
Okay.
but where to start? So many things to say. I think so. As I was saying earlier, I think it's a misunderstanding between you two. It's like sort of between you and the Turkish family. It's like you're on different communication levels. You're coming with something, they misunderstand it. But there is a very authentic moment that comes out of it, and I think that's the beauty of documentary cinema. And reading several reactions to your film, I think I've read somewhere that. I'm gonna quote it because I find it interesting, related to what you said. This year's black sheep in the CPH Docs program, and a brilliant satire on documentary filmmaking itself, or somebody who found the film infuriating. And I think this happens because of this uncomfortable feeling that it's sustained all around the film. There is this tension that is. I felt it. I saw the film several times. I felt it each time you ring a doorbell. Even though I know what's going to happen, I am uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I think this is what challenges the spectator the most, and why these reviews are so, let's say, enraged. Do you have the same opinion? What's your take on all this?
Well, yeah, I think it's very true what they say. I mean, I can completely imagine that it's infuriating, and because it's also obtrusive what I'm doing, and I think as a spectator, like whether you want it or not, to a certain level you will become complicit when you watch it, because you know it's this first-person experience actually.
Yes.
And it's it's in that sense. Very, very simple, very natural. I mean, I don't interfere at that point. It's like I once, like as a little bit as a joke, I said it's not a fly in the room like we are used to. It's more like, or not a fly on the wall, but more like the fly in the room. This kind of approach, I would say. So, I can. Like I think it's all has to do with this being complicit as an audience, you know. And there's of course where it starts, when you start to identify with anything that's on the screen. There it starts, you get your emotions, I would say, and it can feel uncomfortable or sometimes touching, or you get angry or anything. Yeah.
How did you choose it? So you said that you had like 400 doors open for you. How did you choose the final form of the film, and which material stays in, which goes out? Because I imagine you had a variation of reactions.
Yeah, it was very difficult. This was by far the most difficult film to edit, because not only because I had so much material of this rule that people had to directly encounter, so there was no limit in that sense, but also because the material was very repetitive. So it was hard. Like at a certain stage in the editing, I thought this is not a film. This is an installation, because I figured the first moments when people open the door for me were from the beginning the by far the most interesting, because you see them, you know, what we just talked about, these feelings you have as an audience, but also of course you see how those people go through certain emotions. You know, you see in their face like little shifts, like from anger to like, well, maybe curiosity, or you know. And like the first minute was, I thought maybe this is it, you know, maybe just the first minute after the door has opened. And so you know, in the editing for a while I was trying to somehow, like you normally do when you have a very you know, normally when I work in a very constructed way. So you can say I'm a documentary filmmaker, but I think I also have some aspects of maybe it's more related to fiction, the way I write scenes and try to find the right essence in that sense, the essence that I would like to get out in the open. But no, so at a certain moment I remember that I really had to teach myself again, like it's not like I shouldn't project my own ideas on the material, but I should see what the material has to offer me. That was actually the most important moment in the editing, and when I realized that, then I think also this more mystical element, like me behind the camera, like this entity, like this almost supernatural godlike figure, you know, like as we see in the opening, just walking on the earth and just filming like a child everything that's in his way. And so I started to develop the narrative, I think, from the entity behind the camera, and by, you know, embracing this more mystical elements. I think also I try to, in the sound design, to sustain that. And then of course, yeah, and then it was at a certain point I realized that I needed like two little dramatic arcs, although of course the narrative and the dramatic arc of this film I think is very simple, and I like that often in films. It's like, you know, it starts with denial and it becomes aggressive, and then we go the other way around. So it has like I would say two little dramatic arcs, but and not puzzling, you know. It's not like a very puzzling narrative or whatever. I always say, for me, like the if you want to puzzle the audience, it should be in the film language and the form itself for me, and not necessarily in the way you tell a story from A to Z. I think that's where it can maybe quickly turn into a formula, and I always try to avoid this.
Okay. On a more because you answered several questions, and so I'm trying to sum it all up. And one of the questions I had myself while watching the film, on a more philosophical level, if you want, is on what the relationship between a director and his character is based. Do we need a lot? Do we need just a tiny bit? And I would like to ask you, on what do you build the relationship with your characters? And don't hesitate to refer to your previous films, because I think here your previous films as Among Us, where or Stranger Among Us, for those in the public that do not know, it's the portrait of three pedophiles. So just the topic is very challenging for the spectator, but it's very interesting. How did you get in touch with them, and how did you get them to have this intimate confessions for you? And also in Stranger in Paradise, you work with an actor. So it's a great diversity in your approach with the characters. I will re-say the question because I might have gotten too long with the explanation. So how do you build your relationship with the characters?
Well, that's very simple. It's just there's one word, and that's trust, and like sincere curiosity in the people you meet. That's the only thing I can say. That's all there is to it. If you are sincerely curious, then everything goes by itself. There's no strategy involved for me in that sense. It was with the pedophiles, reflecting on their pedophile tendencies in this film Among Us. I mean, when I met them and I just explained, I'm just very interested. How does it work? You know, how does this? Like, of course, you know, we have all these stereotypical ideas about pedophiles that they all, you know, when they see a child on the street, you know, it's very difficult, and they have to jump on it, for example, which I also discovered in this film is not true at all in that sense. It has to do with other things. This sex drive, I think, it has much more to do with libido than what, like, if you're a pedophile or heterosexual or whatever. No, so I think I'm wandering away. So yeah, trust and sincere curiosity. That's my answer.
Okay. No, I was thinking because it makes me reflect on for me, the way your film finishes, but I will probably keep this for later on because what surprised me is that you need very little. I won't say everything for the public to discover the film, but you need very little also to have a relationship with someone in the end. It doesn't have to go via speaking, and I think
but that's maybe good to mention. Like trust, of course, like essentially has nothing to do with communication and if it's verbal, non-verbally, but what you should also consider the people that are in the film, and especially in the end. I went to them not one time, not two times, maybe seven or eight times, and I think they knew that I was not living in the neighborhood. So they knew I took the car and drove 2 or 3 hours without knowing if they were at home, you know?
Yeah.
So that's also a way to show that you're interested and that you give like a certain attention to them, like every human being that gets, of course, attention. It's that's how the trust, I think, can evolve slowly. You know, so this is the thing. So although, of course, and I completely agree, like especially in the beginning of the film, it can be very infuriating and obtrusive and etc. But I do think the trust grew from this mutual interest. Like I was interested in what they had to show or tell, whatever, and they were interested in what is this, you know, who is this guy who's coming back all the time without telling anything.
I propose we watch another video. This is going to be the video number 2 because it kind of relates with what we're saying right now.
Deze meneer staat aan de deur en die zegt helemaal niks. En ik kom binnen filmen. Dus als jij weet wat het is.
Hallo.
Als die maar niet van D66 is. Daar heeft hij een vet probleem.
Ga naar school open.
Ja, wezen, hè?
Ja.
Manneke. Doei. Ik moet ook weer aan het werk, dus ja, zo zachtjes aan. Moet ik maar een beetje afronden. En ja, zal ik je officieel uitlaten dan? Ja. Hey, alle goeds. Succes in je carrière, wat dat hier ook maar wezen. Pas op, hè, voor het karretje, hè. Dat je niet valt. Ja, dat is toch belangrijk dat je dat weet. Hey. Dat is van de groepsapp hier zo van het dorp. En dan wordt er al gemeld, kijk, de politie is al op de hoogte. Dus dat is dan weer zoiets met zo'n groepsapp. Dan wordt er iemand een beetje zenuwachtig en dan heb je zoiets. Hè. Dus dan weet je ervan. Dat het, ja, je mag ze naar nummer 19 sturen als ze vragen hebben. Maar ja, ik ben ook niet meer thuis, dus dat schiet er niet veel mee op. Maar dan kun je in ieder geval jij daarop voorbereiden. Moest er iemand hierop aanspreken of zo. Hè. Dan, oké? Hey, doei!
We're back, and we saw this scene that has so much meaning for all of us that saw the film entirely. So once again, I advise you all to watch it. This allows me to go into the, let's say, production part and more technical details, because at the end of this scene, the character warns you that there is a police group that you've been spotted. They might come after you. From a legal point of view, what were your, let's say, difficulties? How did you solve them? How did you obtain consent from all the characters afterwards?
Yeah, the difficulty was that it was quite risky, this project, in the sense that I developed it like the shooting period. I divided it into like 2 or 3 parts. So the first time I did is 10 days, and then I also came back to the writing table. Okay, what did I do? I watched back the material. What went good? What went wrong? Sometimes I like, for example, like these rules I set myself, I broke them, like in many occasions. But not like, and then I had to delete the material that way. So for example, people would say, "Oh, are you from this broadcaster?" And then like I would nod yes, and then they say, "Which broadcaster?" And I said, when I couldn't respond, and then they would name all the broadcasters in the Netherlands. And that comes to my main point, like the broadcaster I developed this film with. And in the Netherlands, the system, if you want to have a certain fund, or if you want to finance your film, you need a broadcaster in documentary filmmaking. And they were very, they said, yeah, but what are we going to do? Like, imagine, like, you have all those people, you have your film, and then you still have to ask permission, it's, maybe they won't give permission. And I was always thinking, yeah, but I mean, if they let me inside their homes, I mean, they see it's a big camera, I mean, there's a huge amount of trust. Why wouldn't they give permission to be on television or anything like that? No, so that was the reason that they stepped out. So the broadcaster stepped out, and I actually finished this film and produced this film with a new production collective. I started with 2 of my friends, like director, Bosnian Dutch director Anna Sendijarevic, and sales agent Wouter Jansen, who distributed all my previous films as well. So this is actually our first film, and what we did, so we had like I had a version I was satisfied with, and then I, together with another, like the co-producer, we went back to all the places, to the character in the end of the film, to everyone, and of course that was very exciting. I thought maybe like 50% will not give permission, but in the end it turned out that maybe I think 90 to 95% gave permission, and for the ones who didn't give permission, that we could like, we could substitute it for like comparable material. But like the most important people in terms of screen time, they all gave permission. Like from the last part of the film, we didn't have to change anything actually. So in the end, it turned out that all these worries from the broadcaster were not necessarily rightful.
So if I understand correctly, you stuck to the protocol during the whole time you filmed, and they only knew when you went for consent that this is a documentary film, this is the project, who you are, and so on.
Yeah.
Oh wow, that's cool.
Yeah, I think it's good to do, because now it's on my mind, like the first stage. But I don't think that the people, maybe most of them are not in the film. I think in the beginning I did when I filmed, and I always had a letter with me, like this material will be removed unless I'll come back for permission.
Okay.
And I think in the beginning, when I met someone who was very welcoming, or who let me inside his or her home, then in the beginning I used to have this and that was also because of the first producer that was involved in the project, like more in the development stage. But some material of the development stage ended up in the film still. But then I had this letter saying like, okay, you have been filmed, maybe this person will come back, it's not something criminal. You know, like 3 or 4 sentences. So that was like for some, but then I also got rid of it because I thought it was not pure enough for me. But you know, but still that was like to feel them a bit at ease and not to thinking that, you know, who's this guy like coming every time and maybe he's a criminal, I don't know. So I mean, I maybe it's interesting to mention also, you mentioned the police, but I filmed a lot on the borders. So actually, you know, for example, I don't know, it's Sealand. It's like, you know, the close to Belgium. And also close to the borders of Germany. And then the problem is in these regions these days that there's quite a lot of criminality because people break into someone's home and then they run across the border. So that was also the reason why I was called back by the police like, I don't know, 4 or 5 times, and I had to identify myself and explain different things.
I wanted to ask you, how do you work with your public? How do you imagine the spectator for your films? And if when you start creating, you think about them. And this question kind of came up to me because when I saw, for example, when I saw Escort, I found it very interesting how the film was directed because my empathy shifted during the film. Mm-hmm. At the beginning, I was really I had lots of empathy for the deportees, and then when the police officers were in the role, I understood also the difficulty of their position. And the same thing also happened with Among Us, that really challenges the spectator and kind of forces him to go to surpass his prejudice. And Stranger in Paradise really takes us through a variety of emotions. Same thing happens here also. So is this something that's very important for you? Do you create with this idea in mind, the public's reactions?
Yeah, I think it's like I think it's even the most important thing for me. Like I always try to imagine myself as a spectator. How I organize. I have a lot of screenings with people, and then because I want to know how the spectator, what it does to him, you know. For me, the way the spectator is like that's it, you know. How, in which positions can he be moved? How can you stir his imagination to places that where it has never been before? That's what's always in my mind. And just the strategies or the way how, of course, it's always different in different films. But no, for me the spectator is I could never make a film without if there were no spectators. It would be impossible for me, I think.
Great. I'm happy that, I don't know if it helps, but this is something that you really feel when you see the films, because you really travel emotionally from inside the film and from one film to another. What I also found interesting in A Man and the Camera is that we have this very challenging scenes and for example, in Stranger in Paradise, at the end of the film, you add this self-reflexive episode where everything is a bit explained, and this kind of helps the audience to position themselves regarding what was seen before. You kind of, you really give them a push, you help them. Or in A Man and the Camera, I feel that you went more purist, let's say, and you didn't add this reflexive let's say part, even though it is in the structure of the film itself, but in a different way. And I was wondering why the radical change? How do you challenge yourself from one film to another, and how did you evolve from one film to another?
Yeah, I think I mean, for me, like I don't necessarily know the actions that are involved with it, but I can say like for me, if the medium doesn't innovate, it will fail. That's always what's in my mind, you know. For me, every film should, you know, like I said before, like sincere curiosity in people, but also in the medium of film itself. If you make a film, you have to be interested in the medium of film. Otherwise, you should do something else. And this is how I try always to go to places and to find ways how can I at least like innovate it in a way, you know, and just give it at least a try to invent a certain film language that's, of course, you know, to a certain extent everything has been made before, but if I would repeat myself, if I would have that feeling, then I would be very depressed, I think. So I always try to, like the novelty in form is for me very important, I would say. And how I come to this is just like repeating it to myself every time. So, for example, this film, it's 5 years after my last film, so it can take a while sometimes, and sometimes you know, some ideas have to stay there for a while before they can really be made. I really have to feel a certain like urgency. And with this film, like on many occasions, you know, what is this? What, you know, so immature when I was at certain points thought I could never make this into a film. But I always had this feeling that it had something interesting, because it like you said, the self-reflexiveness, which I think is a very crucial part of documentary filmmaking, also in regard to the power balance. Like, you also have to be aware of yourself in the medium, I think, and with this film it's so essentially in the concept, in that sense, that I thought, I should make a film, whatever how it will turn out, but I should do it. For me it's like, one thing is the audience, always thinking about the audience, like, okay, how would an audience perceive this, you know, how can I like create a conflict in the mind of the audience. It's always on my mind, especially, and the second thing is like trying to innovate the medium of film. That's actually, I think it's even more important, that part, than like thematically or something, you know. There are so many things that I find interesting, but of course every story has been told already.
I have a question, because this is a question that I always ask myself as a programmer when seeing documentaries, about this tension that exists between the documentary filmmaker's artistic interests and his characters. And I think I saw this in an interview with you, and you said the documentary filmmaker always exploits a bit his characters. Do you think this tension can ever be resolved? Do you think it can be balanced in a way?
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak for myself, of course, in this part. So there are like, I mean, I suppose there are plenty of documentary filmmakers who have like a very balanced power dynamics between them and the people in front of the lens. And of course, you know, if you know the strategies that are applied to it or attached to it, you know, it's all about trust, of course, and then how do you treat people, and are you sincerely curious. If you have all those things, I think you will get quite far. But maybe for me, because I like, of course, a certain provocation or like a polemic element in the film. I like to create this conflict in the audience's mind, and that's maybe what can make it tricky sometimes. And actually, you know, because sometimes I feel I have to adapt certain methods and work in certain ways, that this power balance, especially at the point of filming, is a bit, you know, not completely equal, I would say. So that's also, I have a hard time quite many times on this. I don't know if I will make many documentaries more, because I have like problems with, let's say, like if you the filmmaking process itself and the people therein, of course, you're always talking about the lives and of people. It doesn't drift away when you turn the camera off. You can make a big influence and you have a big responsibility to enter there as well. But once the film is out in the open, when you see it on film festivals or television or wherever, I think it's there will always stay this balance, because there's always like if you want it or not, like there is this inherent, for me personally, like you are like using their images, for other purpose. They are not. You can have contact, keep in touch, of course, but there's still this. I think this balance that you are to a certain extent, using them, as for maybe a greater goal, but still you use. And with actors, you pay them literally on set, so. And everyone knows, it's also in their favor because maybe they can, play in a new film as an actor. But I mean, did you ever, like, a documentary character that never gets a call? Oh, I saw you in this documentary, and maybe we can do another project. You know what I mean? These kind of things. I think it's something to think about, maybe. But
no, I think this is very important because I think, the economics and politics that goes with documentary filmmaking as an industry, but that's based on people's real lives. It's something, it's an ethical question essential to documentary. But you mentioned conflict, and I personally hesitated to show this following video because I said, okay, I shouldn't, because I will confirm some expectations with it, but it will allow us to talk more. So I will invite you all to see another video right now.
Hallo. Hallo. Wie bent u? Wat komt u doen? Bent u mij aan het filmen?
We're back here in the studio. What interested me in this scene was the way we see cameras in today's society, and this was a question that I really wanted to ask you about, because I found a man and the camera relevant at several levels. It touches our fear of the unknown. So there is somebody at the door, we open. It's represented by a stranger knocking at our door. So what is our conception as a society towards this unknown or constantly knocking at the door, and how do we deal with it? But also the way we deal with cameras. So you are at this guy's house, and we see at some point that his wife is filming you also. And I had this uneasy feeling here because, well, there is the beating, so yes, but the idea that we all use cameras as protection, but also as a way to accuse somebody else in a way, because she's filming the possible conflict. You know, we're using camera as guns. Was this something that you had in mind when you did this film?
No, to be honest, not really. I was also surprised that she was filming from the other side. Actually, the guy who gave us permission in a very interesting way, I think. But he said, "Yeah, maybe you should also watch this. You know, maybe you should consider including it in the film or something. You know, the material of her, you know, filming like the beating, but then like in a different way." No, but I mean, of course, it's inevitable that the film appeals to this thematic level, I would say. But you know, since I like one of these rules I talked to you about before, like confine myself to ordinary environments, I was like, for me it was more the interest like in the medium of film itself, and like how to relate exactly to a video camera, like you know, very simple in that sense, like the essence of it and the fear of the unknown. But I wasn't really like this more social kind of element or sociological, you know. I was not really, you know, working on that. I think it's just like maybe a present in that sense.
What are your thoughts now after, so the film has ended, is now circulating, when you see the reactions, but also when you see the film, how did you, what are your thoughts about this? What's the conclusion of this film for you?
I don't know, because I never watch my films after they're finished.
Oh.
I haven't watched it since then, so maybe I can sometimes I do it if it's necessary, but then maybe I can, like for a certain interview like this or something, I have to rewatch my own material. But I don't like to rewatch my own films, and I really, it takes also time for me to process, like you know, how do I see my own film material. I find it very hard to say something about it. I just
let me put it another way. What have you learned during this film?
Yeah, I think I have to disappoint you with the same answer.
Oh.
I have learned certain things. I would assume, but I cannot point out it right now. I think that always also takes time. It's for me, like when you're, how do you say, when you're learning, when you're like diving into a certain topic or subject, it also, you know, and like for me, my brain, until it really processes it and it becomes like part of myself, it takes maybe 1 year or maybe 2 years that I can really say, okay, this is, you know, what it did to me or something.
I will try it from a third angle, and if it's not
very disappointing.
How is A Man and the Camera an answer to your previous film, or a continuation to Stranger in Paradise?
Yeah, well, yeah, like I said, like when I talked about the 3 categories, you know, the extraordinary people, extraordinary subjects in ordinary forms, and Stranger in Paradise for me was like an extraordinary subject, but also in a slightly extraordinary form. And with this, for me, was I really, the answer is in the places I went to, I really wanted to get to know this ordinary environments, like people like you and me, you know. I wanted to stay close to this, as close as possible. I wanted to remove every journalistic element in that sense, you know. There was this writer or journalist, his name was, he died a while ago, Ger van Westerlo, and he once said, he used to write big, long reads. For example, you have this boat in Amsterdam, and he would stand at this boat every morning at 7:15, and he would make a portrait of those people, but not like it's done nowadays that you have like one moment, but he would go there for months, and then he would write this story, you know, and almost like a book, like who are those people standing, you know. You actually, maybe you can, nowadays you would consider him more like a filmmaker, I would say, than a journalist, but he said once, if something happens, I have to get out of there. That was always in the back of my mind. I always had to, and that's the answer to Strange in Paradise, because obviously Strange in Paradise is also reflecting, you know, on the power relations between European and migrants. And although I really, for me, Strange in Paradise is about Europe and not about migrants, very consciously, I didn't give the migrants a face. Like I didn't want to give them a face, or like I didn't want to make them into characters, but like more like treat them as instruments for the sake of the film and for the message, or like the ideas I wanted to conceive to the audience. But still, people say, oh yeah, and you know, many people write, oh yeah, there's a new migrant film about migrants, you know. So you know, you in this film, there's still the attachment to current events. That's what I wanted to get rid of.
Mm.
Yeah.
You talked about Stranger in Paradise, and there's this scene at the end of the film with which I would have liked, in a very ironic way, to end our talk today, where the actor Valentine actually demystifies everything that we saw, and there's this dialogue with the migrants, and they ask him, they ask him two important questions. How does this film help us? And that was very interesting and brutal, because yes. So do you think that documentary filmmaking does help its characters? And this, I'm not referring to A Man and the Camera, where we get
in general.
In general, yes, and especially when we talk about intense topics like migration or deportation, pedophiles, all this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very hard to answer it. It could on some occasions, but it's very difficult to take a general stand, I think, on this matter. You know, but like what we talked about before, like this discrepancy between like the more political, economic side of when you finish your film, you screen it in different environments, and then there's of course the real people you're talking about. Yeah, that will always be there, I think. But yeah, you know, for a very short period of time, I studied ethics as well, like practical ethics, and I always remember there was this, I don't know who it was, but this philosopher who said, yeah, but what's the alternative? If you talk about ethics, you should always think like, is this the best possible solution in comparison to the possible alternatives present, you know? And that's what sometimes, so I wouldn't necessarily say these kind of films would help those people, but I wouldn't also say it would do them harm. Like it would be better if you wouldn't have made those films, you know, and that would be the alternative then in that sense. But of course, I mean that's also maybe a problem I have myself. Like you have of course the activistic documentary, and you know but for me is that activism is very closely related to propaganda, and you know, for me it comes to a point that I think you're also like not maybe exploiting the people, but then you're exploiting the medium of film, I would say. You know, so there, so that then it would shift to this kind of exploitation. Because I don't like this. I find it, you know, I think activism is more efficient, or efficient altruism should be not necessarily, you know, you shouldn't need to use the medium of film for that, or you shouldn't need to portray those characters. I don't necessarily believe, like, you know, when I made Strange in Paradise, there were all these films on migrants, and there are many directors like saying out loud, yeah, and, you know, this is, I want to change, I want to, you know, make sure those people have better lives. And I don't think making a film is like would be the best strategy. I think film is about something else, you know, and not about necessarily like giving those characters a better life, you know.
I think we are reaching the end of our talk, but I would like to ask you, are you working on a new project right now? And is it a documentary?
Yeah, actually I am, because I got myself catched up in a different film that I shot it in South Sudan, and it's nearing completion. I did it like simultaneously with a man and a camera, and it was also a film, like, especially the topics we talked about today. I also had a lot of hesitations, like can I make this film? Should I make this film? But in the end, I did, and you know, it's about this delegate from the Red Cross, a white man who travels the inlands of South Sudan to teach militias and soldiers the ethics of war. So, like, humane warfare exists in the Geneva Conventions, and he is trying to get that across, this message to the soldiers in South Sudan. And yeah, there are also there are many things to say about it, and I'm now actually sound designing it. So hopefully it will be finished soon. But after this, I have nothing. I mean, I don't anymore have any film for documentaries or ideas. I mean, I don't have documentary ideas. So probably this will be my last documentary for a long period of time, I think.
Never say never, you know, documentary can be very tricky. It gets you back when you least expect it.
Yeah, maybe.
Guido, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time. I'm really glad that we got to talk about the nitty-gritty of documentary filmmaking. I once again say to our public, don't hesitate to see A Man and the Camera on our platform sooner. It's still available until the 30th of May, and I'm sure this conversation that we had with Guido would help you to navigate all the questions that you will have while watching the film. Thank you for being with us.